to Maxed Out Man, helping you become the man you were made to be.
Hey guys, it's Kevin Davis from the Maxed Out Man podcast. This is episode number 19. I am here today with Dr. Jed Diamond, who is the founder of Men and Live. He's also a writer, publisher, psychotherapist, and consultant, and helps men and the women who love them to live long and well, which we're all super excited about. And I appreciate you joining me, and welcome.
Well, thank you. It's good to be with you.
Yeah, so if you want to, I know you've been at this for quite a while now, so I'd love to kind of just get more of your journey and backstory. I always call it the kind of a superhero backstory that we all have. So I'd love to kind of hear how you got here, what you do, and then we can kind of, nail it down through some different topics from there.
Well, just to kind of give you a little introduction, the way I got started in this field was with the birth of my first son, which was November 21st, 1969. And at the time, I was coaching my wife through the Lamaze childbirth exercises to help her get through the labor and the process of childbirth. It was our first child, and we'd gone to classes to learn. And I was a little bit frightened about being in the delivery room, but my wife wanted me to be there, and I felt like that's what good men ought to do.
Right.
So
not sit outside with a cigar waiting for things to happen
exactly.
like the 50s, right?
But back then, so this is 1969, Kaiser Hospital in California, where we were living at the time in Northern California. We got close to the time. It was a fairly long labor, and at some point the nurse said, well, I think it's time, Mrs. Diamond, take you to the delivery room. Mr. Diamond, your job is done now. You can go wait in the waiting room. And I was somewhat relieved because I felt like this was something that I'd taken her as far as I could. It was difficult, but
time to hand the ball off
at the time that this is at the hospital. Fathers go to the waiting room. So I started out the waiting room door, kissed my wife goodbye and wished her well, and waiting for the blessed event. But as I was starting to go through the waiting room door, I couldn't go through the door. Literally, there was a force that held me back, and it felt like was the call of my unborn child telling me, I don't want a waiting room father. Your place is here with us. And so I turned around and just walked back the way I had come, found the delivery room, and walked in the door and just took my place at the head of the table, so to speak. And there's no question of my leaving if asked. I just felt that this was where I needed to be. And wasn't long after that our son, Jamal, was birthed. And as he came into the world, they handed him to me. And as I held him for the first time, I made a promise to him that I would be a different kind of father than my father was able to be for me, and to do everything I could to create a world where men were fully involved with their families throughout their lives. And we had a world where fathers and men generally were fully healed. And we had a daughter subsequently, Angela, 2.5 years later. And so together, it was the beginning of Men Alive, which is my window to the world, where my work is housed and where I share my my learnings and my work. And my specialty is working with men and their families and helping them live the lives that they were meant to live. So that's just a thumbnail sketch of kind of how I began and what my kind of creation story was.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, so your daughter is probably, I was born in 72, so I'm 50. Your daughter's about a similar age as I am, and my wife.
We just had her up here celebrating my 50th birthday, and she has 4 children. So my wife and I now have 5 grown children, 17 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. And I've been doing this work now for, more than 50 years.
Wow. That's I'm sure things have changed a lot since then. I mean, my dad was pretty uninvolved whenever I was probably born, and then subsequently they divorced when I was 6. So he wasn't really all that involved. So that was pretty progressive of you in 1969 to and I know my wife's dad was the same way. Like, I don't think the man has ever changed a diaper. That was for the mom, and any emotional thing was for the mom. And so yeah, that's interesting. So how has that changed? I mean, man, has there been a progression, like with each decade, that you would see things have changed and evolved, and in some cases now probably devolving again in some way? I don't know how you feel about that, but I'd be interested to see, like, from, you've got 70s and 80s, 90s, and, we're all the way up to 2023 now.
Sure. Well, if you take, just to complete the story of my father, the father that I wanted to be different from was my own father, who was left when I was 5 years old. And he left not by choice. He left because he had what was called at the time a, quote, nervous breakdown, which really was a suicide attempt because he had become increasingly depressed, stressed, angry, frustrated, because he couldn't make a living to support his family. And in his mind, if a man can't support his family, he isn't worth anything as a man. And then what's the use of being around? So in his despair, he took an overdose of sleeping pills, ended up in a mental hospital. So that part of the journey not only was traumatic, obviously, for our whole family, but I grew up wondering what happened to my father. When is it going to happen to me? Because my mother was terrified, I would grow up like my father and get crazy and try to kill myself. And I then started on this journey, even as a 5-year-old, to somehow figure this stuff out. So when I look at this, both journey that I've been on and then professionally for the last 50 plus years, I've seen a very slow at first change that at the time when I first started working with men's issues, nobody was doing that. I mean, this was, if you
Right.
Know the times, was women's liberation, and women were coming to the fore, and women were, deciding they didn't want to live inside, the female restrictions that were there. And I was very supportive because it felt to me like the same liberation that women were saying they wanted, to me, would liberate men. I mean, if women got free, men would get free. So I was supportive of kind of the early liberation movement. But what I found was there was a dark side to the women's movement that I think is still there, which is that in the liberation, there was a side to it. Not all people, and certainly not all women that were liberated blamed men, but there was a cultural belief that if women were not getting their due, somebody must be causing it. And many felt that, well, the men are keeping us from the work that we should be doing, keeping us out of jobs that we, are qualified to do. And what I came to believe, and there were many other women and men that believe this, one of my long-term friends and colleagues named Rianne Eisler, who wrote a book back 40 years ago called The Chalice and the Blade, where she talked about that it wasn't patriarchy that was the problem or matriarchy that's the problem. And some people, men think, well, the problem now, you say it's gone back the other way. And now there's many men that think, well, the problem must be women, and women thinking the problem must be men. What Rianne said was the problem is what she called the dominator system, the system that oppresses men and women in different ways. And so at Men Alive, in the center that I started 50 years ago, what we recognize is that it's not men that are the problem or women that are the problem, but a system that has been in place a long time that restricts who men can be and who women can be. And the restrictions, if you think about it, are kind of reciprocal. That is, the things that men have been told they must be are the same things that women are told they must not be. So men must be strong, and then women are told they must not be. They must be gentle and caring. And the other side is the same thing that men are taught they must not be. They must not be soft and gentle, are the same things that women are taught they must be. So
that's it.
In a sense, liberation, real liberation, which is what, I've been doing for years and helping other people do, is liberation that frees us all up, that tells us that we are many of our brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers, in a system that is not functional. I think part of the reality of the world we're living in, and what I think is changing, is we're beginning to recognize that the system of domination, whether it's men over women, women over men, or humans over the environment, that somehow humans are the dominant species and God gave us the right to do whatever we want here on the earth, and any other animals and any other parts of the living system will bow to our will or be wiped out. We're realizing that makes no more sense than a part of the body deciding it's the dominant part and says all the other parts of the body must follow the brain or the heart or whatever organ you think is dominant, or we're going to kill the rest. Well, we're all connected. So I think when I say things have started to change slowly, I think they're accelerating now, where more and more organizations are talking about real liberation for men and for women. My specialty happens to be helping men, as you say, and the families that love them. And there are now thousands, literally, of organizations, and we've been helping to organize, to bring others together, to be able to create the change that I think we all want, and to create, in the words of my friend and colleague Charles Eisenstein, the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. And I think that's what we're about. That's what I'm about.
Yeah. And do you I'm just looking at kind of it seems like people are not very good at the balance, right? It's like with the women's live movement, like you're saying, men are the enemy. And I think in certain terms, we're kind of still the enemy, in some circles in that way. And then, that means that I have to be, so my wife and I, we do a ton of stuff in the automotive world, but it's almost exclusively with all female automotive technicians, welders, painters, and that kind of thing. So these are very strong women that have been, that are pursuing their occupation and their career in a male-dominated field. And so what we've found so often is that many of these women almost have to put on this non-feminine persona in order to fit in and to be a part of that system. And, when you get them in private, you realize that, no, there are womanly feminine traits that you've had to set aside that make your life this kind of out of balance. I don't know if that's something that you've seen over the years or if that's something that we're still going through.
Yeah, very, very much so. I actually just did, I have a podcast that I do as well. And I was interviewing a neuroscientist Jill Belty Taylor, who talks about the two sides of the brain. We all know that the brain has two hemispheres, a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere, and the left hemisphere has often been viewed as the more, the male side or the masculine side. It's the doer, it's the action-oriented side, and the right side is the beer, just the here and now, present consciousness kind of thing. And that what's clear is that we in our society, and there's reasons that I think why this has gotten to be this place, we're very overly developed on the masculine side, whether it's males or females, that we have to, be dominant, we have to be, action oriented, we have to do things, we have to be, and that we force people, males and females, if you want to be successful in the world, you gotta lean in, you gotta, make things happen kind of thing, which is good. It's true. We need that. But there's a whole nother side of the brain. It's called the right side, the right hemisphere, that is more here and now. It's more in how do we be in the world? How do we connect? How do we see our world in partnership rather than in domination? And I think the thing that makes this more difficult and has put us in this conflict where it's us against them, whoever the us is and whoever the them is, there's that conflict, is that we increasingly live in a society that makes money, our type of capitalism that we are is kind of at the end stages, because it can't keep using up all the earth's resources. It's just not a capitalism that's going to be successful, but it is based on that we make more money, except for independent, people like you and independent media, but most of the, the media and the world of making money makes more money if there's more conflict, whether you're doing a Facebook or Google or any of the major, players. The world makes more money based on conflict, and there's more clicks, there's more ways in which people get more likes or dislikes if you have an enemy that you can put. So I think that kind of mentality pushes people more towards separation, when the true liberation and the true stability in the world and the true making a good living in the world really is a balance between the individual doing your own thing and the collective working together. Men, being able to be soft and gentle, and women being able to be strong and assertive, but also being able to balance both sides of our individual brains and both sides of our way of being in the world, so that we can be together in ways that nourish ourselves, nourish our relationships, and hopefully nourish the environment that we all share, so we can all live long, healthy lives.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that it seems like the most successful people, which is kind of counterintuitive, is that are those people that are the most right brain, left brain, kind of center brain oriented, because they are not only aggressive enough, driven enough to kind of get things done, but they also are able to engage with people. You think of a very successful salesperson, right? The most successful salespeople are those that can identify with the pain points that people have, understand where they're coming from emotionally, understanding what their needs are and how to meet those needs, but then also be driven enough to then ask for the sale and those aspects of business. And it seems like that also brings contentment to the people that are more like that, because if, we have this word, and I'm an entrepreneur, and the, buzzword is always hustle and grind, right? Which I hate those terms, because they're so single-sided. It just means if I just work hard enough, then things will come my way. And that's just patently untrue. And secondly, you end up with a very unfulfilled life and just completely driven by work and ambition versus the holistic approach to life.
Well, we need both. I think that's the key, and that's what the neuroscience and the latest studies on brain function show, that just as we need both a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere, they need to be in balance. And there's a connection between the left and the right, the beer and the doer. We have to know when to do what. If we're always in the being mode, nothing gets done. Nothing gets created. You're just in the now. And living in the now is great, and being in that blissful state of enjoyment of the beauty and nature is great. But we also need to recognize individuals need to do things in the world. And it's when things get out of balance, or you have an economic system that makes money on disconnection and disables people so that you can sell them more stuff to make them feel better, that increases the conflict and the disconnection. So one of the things at Men Alive is, I write books on various aspects of health and healing for men and women. I've written 17 books, and the most recently, we call it Long Live Men. And we've developed what we call our Moonshot for Mankind, which is an idea that we brought together after, myself working in the field for 50 years. One of my colleagues, about 20 years ago, they did a research study that for me was enlightening and enlivening. What they found was that they studied 20 different cultures throughout the world. And they found that in every country they studied, men died sooner than women as a group, and they lived sicker. That is, they had every major disease, certainly of the top 10 or 15, at higher rates than women, which is why we die earlier.
Right.
And their conclusion was, to me, a call to action. And what they said is that if you could simply help men live as long as women as a group, because we know, women live longer than men, in this country by, now 6 years or so, and men in this country still die from all the leading cause of death, from heart disease to cancer to depression to suicide, at rates much higher than women. So if you could just help men simply do the things that would help us live longer, their conclusions were startling. They said, number one, you would save 375,000 men's lives every year in the United States alone. So think about that, 375,000 men's lives every year. Fathers, think of the fathers that would be saved, the brothers, the sons, the grandfathers who die before their time.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing they said was that if you're looking at the risk factors that cause early death, you think of alcoholism or violence or cigarette smoking or now loneliness, not having social connections. If you looked at all the different risk factors, the number one risk factor that predicts whether a group of people are going to live long or die sooner is simply being male. If you knew nothing else about a group of people, if you knew they were male, or the person was male that you were asking about, you could predict that they would likely die sooner than any group of females. And the final thing says, if you could simply help men live longer, healthier lives, you would do more good in the world than curing cancer. It's pretty amazing. So I had oriented Men Alive and my organization probably 20 years ago to look at the major causes of not only physical disease, but mental and emotional disease that are connected. And a year and a half ago, I invited 8 other colleagues who I knew were doing exceptionally good work in the world of men's health to join me to not only see what we were collectively doing that was working, but how we could then reach out to, now I'm guessing, 1,000 organizations that I've learned about over the last number of years that are really doing good work. And how could we collaborate together to create the conditions that would help men live healthier, longer, more satisfying lives? And so we've been putting out our work. We're going to be organizing some online teaching opportunities in July and some others throughout the year. So this Moonshot for Mankind is launching this year, and we invite you and any of your viewers and listeners to reach out and join us. If you're a man who cares about his own health, if you're a woman who cares about the health of men, you have men in your life, you have sons or husbands or brothers or fathers or grandfathers, and people that are doing work, whether you're doing broadcasts, whether you're doing entrepreneurial work, whether you're doing counseling work, we invite you to join us and collaborate so that together, I really believe we can change the world. The moonshot idea is not only, that what it took to put a person on the moon, a man on the moon, but I have friends that work at Google, and there's a part of Google they call Google X, and they call it their Moonshot Factory. And at Google X, they try to address problems that are going to get solved if you could make a difference in those areas. You could not only improve things 10%, but you could improve them 10 times. So you'd have exponential positive outcomes. So that's what we hope to do with the Moonshot for Mankind, is not just have a small incremental increase in health and well-being, which would be great, but to have an exponential improvement. And that's what the Moonshot's going to do. And we already know there are a lot of things that we already know can help men live longer, healthier lives. And now we want to let others know so that we can all join in the ones that we're ready to embrace and start living healthier, more productive lives.
Yeah, the collaborative effort is definitely key with that, to get everybody kind of working towards the same page. Because I think there's one of the things I've learned by doing this podcast and the Maxed Out Man stuff that I'm doing is that there's many more men, people, and organizations involved in trying to further, masculinity, men's health, men's mental health, all of these ideals in a healthy, positive way. And it's been really great to kind of see that and learn, for sure.
Well, that's what we're about. And that's what we're inviting people to learn more about. Join us in at Men Alive. I have a newsletter that I put out every week with new articles on things that men can do to improve their health, things that women can do to help the men in their lives. And, what women know is that if men's lives are better and healthier, their lives get better, just as men know that if women are happier and our relationships are happier, and everybody does better.
Yeah, it's the whole if mama if she's happy, we're all happy. If mama's happy, everybody's happy, kind of thing. That's a kind of a marital colloquialism, but it's true. If both partners are happy and living more fulfilling lives, it definitely improves the overall sentiment and environment of the
Well, there's another corollary to that colloquialism, which they've done some studies on what are the factors that make for a successful, happy marriage. And we've, up until now, we've assumed that women, if mom is happy, family's happy. Well, it turns out that the actual relationships that determine whether you have a happy marriage are more related to the things that men do. And men can make the difference in ways that we didn't even know we could. And we assumed many times that it's women who are going to hold the family together or keep the marriage together. And it turns out men are the critical factor. And yet most of the books on relationships are written by women, are for women. And it would be like doing heart surgery on the wrong patient. If we could deliver more information that helps men understand the power we have to improve relationships. That's why I wrote a book called The Enlightened Marriage, on the 5 stages of relationship and why the best is still to come, where I describe the 5 stages, and I talk about why most relationships end at stage 3 and why that is, and what we can do as men to change that dynamic so that our marriages last longer and healthier, and our love relationships of all kinds are more successful. So those are some of the resources that that we have and that we share at Men Alive.
Yeah, I think that the overall sentiment is if I'm doing, so the way I'm coming up on 28 years of marriage in July. We and we've been, it's been ups and downs and just like every relationship. But I think that the thing that I have really worked hard at is that if I'm doing everything that I can to make sure her needs are met, and she's doing what she can to make sure my needs are met, then everybody's needs are met, and you don't have to look any other place to get those needs met, and you have this healthy, fulfilling relationship. And I think that that's, something that I think so many men miss. They get, for lack of a better term, they're just lazy in their relationship, and they kind of expect, that it's all going to be the same. I can sit around and do nothing, not really contribute to either the household, or even if I am contributing, I'm not necessarily contributing to the relationship. And then all of a sudden, the kids leave the house at 18 and you have no relationship, and you wonder why your wife is packing her stuff and readying to take the minivan down the road.
Well, it's exactly right. And I've been married now for 43 years. And my wife will tell you that one of the reasons that she believes we've had a really successful 43-year marriage is because I've been in a men's group for 44 years. And
there you go.
I got in a men's group 44 years ago because kind of back to the beginning of when I started, that seemed that women's liberation was bringing women together in groups and supporting each other. And it became very clear to me that, I was kind of a lonely dude. I was out working all the time. I was out, being successful out in the world and, making a lot of money and doing my entrepreneurial activities. But I really didn't have a lot of close friends. I used to when I was younger. I had buddies and played sports in college. But as I got older and got into the work world, got married, had kids, I found my friendships kind of dropped away as we got busier. And I decided that was not good for me. And I was unhappy. And, we know now that many of the studies looking at depression, looking at suicide risk, is that we as a group, as men, we're lonely. It isn't that we're crazy or we're stupid or we're, hostile. It's that we really are disconnected, and we've gotten disconnected from each other. And again, we live in a very unbalanced world where disconnection is the watchword, and being the strong individual kind of lone wolf. Although wolves, as you know, are not lone. They operate in
Right.
packs.
The lone wolf dies. That's
Exactly.
that's always
Yeah,
the
they're the
crazy thing
outcasts.
about that ideal, right?
Exactly. So what I had found is that being a part of a men's group where we could support each other, we could develop a more balanced way of being, was what I wanted. So we've been a group that's been meeting for 44 years.
Wow.
I was the middle in age when the group started 44 years ago. There were 3 older than me and 3 younger. 3 guys have died in recent years. As we've gotten older, I'm now the eldest. I'll be 80 this year, and the other guys that are still here, the 3 younger guys, are slightly younger than me. But I think the key is I wrote one of my other books is called 12 Rules for Good Men, where I kind of brought together what I thought was the most helpful guidance for men. And my first rule or first guidance was join a men's group, because I think that's part of who we are. Back 2 million years ago, men were hunters, and we went out. That's how we made a living and brought home the food. The meat for the family was we hunted. And we didn't just do that. We were in a group, and we talked, and we were at a campfire, and I'm sure talked about what guys talk about today, our love lives, and whether we're getting any sex, or how is it going, or are you happy, or how are your kids, and all of the things that we talk about. Well, we don't do that so much. We don't have natural men's groups where people go out together. So forming groups, and now when we started, there were very few guys that did that. Now men's groups are not an unusual occurrence. And so that part of the healing journey, I think, often starts with men supporting each other, so that when we are in relationship, as my wife says, now she's not my only friend. She's not my only source of connection. So as you say, when we have our ups and downs, which we all do, so many men, our wife is our only friend or our only confidant.
Right.
And when you ask, I do groups, and I'll ask groups, how many friends do you have? How many people do you have that are close, who you would call if you were really hurting? Women will talk about, generally, have 3 or 4 or 5 really close friends. Men often don't have any. Or if we have one, it's our wife or our partner. And if inevitably we're having some issues with our partner, then we don't have anybody we can talk to. So these are issues that I think men need to address as we, move through life and look for those tools that can help us live better and more productive and more joyful lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I had on Tuesday, we released a podcast with a guy named Ed Frauenheim, and he and I talked a lot about the difference between. Oh, you do know it. Oh yeah, I saw that on LinkedIn. So there was a really great conversation, and what we talked mainly about was that you need both types of relationships with other men. You need the shoulder to shoulder, but you also need the face to face.
Yeah.
And, I think I titled the episode something like, I love you, man, and other important things that men need to say to each other. And, and that's something that I am guilty of that. I don't have a lot of friends locally, just because I'm kind of out of sorts in terms of, we live in rural Montana, more farm and ranch community, and I'm not really a great fit for that kind of community. So it's hard for me to make friends in that community, but I have friends worldwide that I have to, do Zoom calls and FaceTime and texts and all that. But I would consider 3 or 4 as kind of my close friend number. And that's something, but I'm still not very good at reaching out, and not very good at, at really fostering. I've been trying to do better. actually, after I had that conversation with Ed, I was like, I really need to do better at this. And so put some effort in. And, but I think
the FaceTime and I have lots of international contacts, but, we're built for face-to-face connection, and one doesn't replace the other. We need both. And so I know people in rural Montana and Idaho and places where I have family, and I just encourage you and others, wherever you are, there are other guys that are good guys and probably have a lot in common with that you didn't know and are worth reaching out to. And I've started numerous groups in addition to the one long one that I mentioned, and it can start as simply as reaching out to another guy. I've started groups that way. Just get another guy to hang out with and then say, do you know somebody? And maybe we could find a third guy. And then the three of us think, do you know anybody? Maybe we find a fourth guy. And gradually, if you find a little group that you can hang out with, you can talk to, you can be together with, you can do things together. And, we need that. The world is a lonely place increasingly for many people. And it's why the suicide rate for men is, we hear it's like 4 times higher than it is for women, but that's just the average. It turns out as we get older, that we get in our 40s, our 50s, our 60s, the suicide rate goes up, exponentially. And so guys in their, for instance, I'm 80 now. So guys in their 80s have a suicide rate 17 times higher than women in their 80s. And they're with the same health problems, the same issues, but men in their 80s are really lonelier. Same thing, guys in their 60s and 70s who have a 6 or 7 times higher rate of suicide than women in their 60s or 70s. So it seems to start significantly higher at midlife. So, you and other men that are of that period of life, this is the time, because I found at midlife, things are either start to get better for men and things start improving, or they start going downhill. And by the time they, get to a point where they start waking up because they have heart conditions or cancers or depression or anxiety or other kinds of illnesses, it's like they're much more isolated, and it's harder then to make friends or to reach out. So don't wait, reach out. I encourage it.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think and what we've seen, I think in our society, I think people that are in their men, 45, 50, 60, that life doesn't, from my experience, especially in the United States, life is not getting better for most of these men. And I think a lot of it is because they either don't know how to be deliberate about living a better life, or they just don't want to, or they don't want to put the effort in, or they have depression, or some of those factors. But I think that's a great point that you're pointing out, that, if you're in your 40s and don't have any friends, don't wait till you're 80 and realize that you still don't have any friends, and then, you're just ultra depressed. I actually was not aware of that statistic. That's a very interesting and sad approach, because a lot of that, and it probably goes back a little bit to what we were talking about before. If your spouse is your only friend, maybe your spouse, in your 70s and 80s, if you're still married that long, that would be great. Maybe your spouse has died, and then that probably compounds that problem. Sure. You have no one, and if you haven't done a great job of developing those relationships with your kids and neighbors, and you may end up looking around and having no one, and then deciding that you're not valuable enough to stick around, which that's it. Be the problem when you come to suicidal thoughts.
Yep, exactly right. We know that, that men, as they age, not only do we lose friends over the years, but we don't make new friends. Women tend to make new friends. I see women just walking in the neighborhood. You'll see a couple of older women walking, but you don't see very often, men walking. They may have a dog that they walk, but Dogs are great.
I was thinking the same thing. Yeah.
They don't replace people. So, it's something that I think all of us guys need to take seriously. It's what we advocate with this Moonshot for mankind. There's things we know that you can do to, the basic stuff about eating better and exercise, but more than those, it's the social connections. It's, as you say, reaching out to a friend, family, somebody you may haven't talked to in a while. And you'd be surprised how, once you get in the habit of it. One of the guys in my men's group moved to a new area and was feeling more isolated. And he finally decided he was just going to make a practice. Every day he was going to reach out to somebody and just see if he could help. Just reaching out, how are you? How you doing? Whether it's a neighbor or somebody that he hadn't talked to in a while, and found out you got in kind of a new habit. It's like a muscle. We're all used to working out physically, and knowing that if you work out regularly, you keep your body physically in shape. Well, emotionally, we need to work out, and working our emotional muscles and our connection with particularly other guys is life-saving.
Yeah, because when you're talking about, I'm a fitness guy, so when you the way you build muscles, you break down the muscle, and then it gets stronger as you go as it rebuilds, and it can be similar with relational stuff and with the fear, as a barrier that needs to be broken down, and a lot of cases I think a lot of times that fear and intimidation is what keeps men from doing that, and either the shame because men don't need other men, or are told we don't need other men. And the irony is that the gym is probably a great place for you to meet other men to build those connections. So you could do those things. You got churches or men's group. If you're still in the work world, you've got, Chamber of Commerce meetings and local, Kiwanis or, whatever those different aspects or those different organizations are. There's ton. And I say this as, as do as I say, not as I do, because I definitely need to do a better job in general of doing that. But most of the relationships I've had over the years either be through church or through, some other organization.
Yeah.
And what we're doing now, which I think is a great idea, you may agree with this, is we are beginning to deal with younger couples. We do some marriage mentoring, not on a professional level, but just on a lay level, and building those relationships. And if you're an older guy, 50s, 60s, 70s and beyond, it's a great opportunity to feed into, a younger guy. And younger maybe if you're 70, the younger may be 60, or it could be 40 or 30, but be able to feed into those men's lives as well.
Yeah. Well, it's a matter of recognizing the importance and breaking out of old patterns, because, the nature of being human is we tend to do what is familiar. It's not surprising. Everybody does that. And if we want to break out of old patterns, we have to be willing to, in a sense, go where we haven't gone before or do what we haven't done before. And we know that, again, back to that original premise, that men have been taught to just go it alone, the Lone Ranger, the masked man, and in some way we're all masked men that are hiding behind, our persona, and some part of us is just dying inside unless we reach out and we touch people, that we connect with people. I really encourage you personally and everybody who's been watching and will watch this and listen, is that you make a promise to yourself that you will do something that you haven't done, that deep inside is going to make your life a little better, is going to improve things. that maybe you've been putting off, or you've been saying, yes, as soon as I do this, as soon as I get maybe New Year's, I'll make a New Year's resolution, or, when the kids get grown, or whatever. We've all got our reasons why we hold back. But I just encourage everybody to make a commitment. Guys usually know how to do that. We just don't always do it for ourselves. We do it for our kids. We do it for others. But making a commitment to be a better me, to be a better partner to myself, to think of not only our children, and in my case, as I said, I have 5 children, 17 grandchildren, 2 great-grandchildren. So, but I've also got a kid inside me that I got to take care of, and we all have that kid.
Right.
So I hope you and all of us take care of the family within us, as well as the external families and communities that we're connected with.
That's great. What now? So real quick, how do we find you? How do we get information? You've got 17 books out there, so I'll put some links to maybe your Amazon, main Amazon author page or something like that as well. But what's the easiest way to find you? Find more information about this Moonshot?
I'm real available, and if you go to menalive.com, menalive, menalive.com, that's my window to the world. You can see my introductory video, Confessions of a Twice Divorced Marriage Counselor. The marriage that I have been in for 43 years is our third marriage. So I haven't always, been the therapist that took his own advice. It took me some tries before I did, but I have done some things right, some of which is because I got a good woman in my life, and some of which was because I got some good men in my life that enabled me to be the kind of man that could attract a good woman. So Men Alive is our window to the world, and on that site you can learn about the Moonshot for mankind, and learn about our free newsletter that I put out every week for anybody that wants to stay connected with the work that I'm doing and what my group is doing to make the world a little better place. So I invite y'all to join me, and happy to hear from you. You can email me at Jed, J-E-D, @menalive.com, and I read all my emails and I answer all my emails. It can take me some time because I get a lot of them, but I always reach back.
That's great. Well, I appreciate your time, Jed. I hope you have a great day. We'll definitely put that in the show notes, and we'll check it out.
Good. Well, let's stay in touch.
Have a great day. Thanks.
You too.
If you're looking to really maximize your life and become the man you were made to be, head over to maxedoutman.com and get your journey started today.